you see one in the sky, if you see one manifest before your very eyes, if you see a strange creature looking outside, then tell it on accounts of the paranormal. Hear it on accounts of the paranormal. Welcome to accounts of the paranormal.
Welcome to the show. Tonight, I welcome Kev LeStarge, a Bigfoot researcher and author of several books on the subject, whose fascination with the mysterious creature began in childhood, growing up in the woods of Wisconsin. Kev's passion for the subject has led him to investigating alongside some of the most well-known researchers in the field. To name a few, Cliff Barackman, Doug Hajicek, Thom Powell, and the late, great Dr. Jeff Meldrum. Kev, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Gino.
Thank you for being here. I am excited to chat with you, Bigfoot researcher, author. I always look forward and I'm eager and anticipating guests with any kind of cryptid stories, and especially Bigfoot. That's something I have such a great fascination on, and I am just elated to have you here chatting the subject. So let's get into it.
Yeah, that too.
I like to go back kind of in people's lives to where this passion began for them. And it looks like with you, this began back in Wisconsin in your childhood, where this fascination for Bigfoot started. Can you go back there and touch on that and what it was like for you?
Yeah, it began, I'll take you way back. Wisconsin, relatively small town neighborhood. And it always, so I'll put it this way, and this is kind of what I've been sharing on other podcasts, but it all started with, I think, my parents, which is kind of a potentially not the standard response that you might hear, but it was them giving me the space to wonder and the space to explore. And, reading these stories like Murray Sendek's Where the Wild Things Are, and having these characters that look like, relatively cryptids themselves, right? And then also watching films like Pete's Dragon with Mickey Rooney, and having the, again, kind of this larger than life. Granted, that was a dragon, but it was just the idea that, this child, there was a relationship with this child that this dragon had. And then it was also the library where I went to elementary school. What was funny about the library was that they had books that I would have to imagine that by today's standards, although today's standards depends who you ask, but they had books all about all sorts of cryptids or ghost books. And I think I was perhaps maybe the only third grader who knew what a poltergeist was. And was really into, probably at the time, perhaps more into the ghost thing first, because that just captured my imagination. And there was, I think, more on the topic at that time. But then the Loch Ness Monster, and of course, being Wisconsin, Ogopogo, or, things like that. And we have a lot of understanding, I think, of that nature, especially with the indigenous, people here, and them playing, I think, a lot into the more Western culture, if you will, white culture, to be frank. But having kind of that openness, I think, really set the spark. And then, of course, later on, you're watching Harry and the Hendersons, and that was just such an awesome, funny enough, actually a very good, there's a lot of Bigfooting community Easter eggs, I will call it, in that movie. But that was probably all of those things combined. And then as the nail kept getting, hit harder and harder for me, it was then the internet. I think that was in 95, and having my own, me millennium Windows computer in my room, and being able to, one of the first websites I go to was the BFRO, which is the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. And that was it. Looking at that and looking at the sites, and I think it just was all kind of a accumulation. But to answer your question in short, I would say it's just having the space and the encouragement to have imagination, and what if there is something else out there besides just us on this planet.
And aside from the deep interest and the fascination with the subject in your youth, was there anything else there? And what I mean by that, was it, so you spend time in the woods and you have your parents. Did you ever hear on the subject of Bigfoot any stories? Did your parents have anything? Did you ever believe you might have seen anything or heard anything interesting? Or at that point, was it still just the deep fascination?
Yeah, at that point it was just deep fascination. We played out in the woods a lot as kids, and this is the first time I'll ever even mention this on a podcast, because I just thought of it now, was the idea that there was this, we called it the pit, and it was behind this water tower. And what was kind of interesting about this area is that we did find, me and a friend or two, we did find arrowheads there, and it was just this kind of crater, but there was all these rocks placed into this crater. And so you kind of start to make it your own little, hangout spot. But I think, so yeah, again, to answer your question more directly, no, we didn't, where we were, it was too residential for any type of a Bigfoot Sasquatch activity. Granted, there are instances and cases where, there are stories and reports of a Sasquatch being in a residential area, but this was we are within towns and towns and towns. If a Sasquatch was wandering around, I mean, that would have been that would have been all over the news. But yeah, no, so nothing like that. But it wasn't until kind of as we were talking pre-show, where we were saying that finding Bigfoot was just what an amazing show that was. And to have those four people do what they were doing, and kind of the only folks finding a Bigfoot at that time and having it on a show, I think that sparked a lot of enthusiasm for its audience. And that to me was also that was probably the final straw, if you will, of okay, if they can get out and do this thing. And then I think they might have mentioned the BFRO on the show themselves, and that's where I was like, I've been on that website all the time. So and then I would look there and I was like, oh, sure enough, they offer to take, it's pay to play or pay to participate. But yeah, you pay, whatever it is, I think it was $300. And as long as you can get yourself to this location and you have the camping and sleeping equipment and all that stuff, you could be with the BFRO, and they will put you in a spot that they're investigating that area for a reason, which is what kind of, I told a family member about it. They were interested in go with you. Sure. Why not? Let's make it an adventure. And that's what's so great about, again, having that trust and, that relationship with a loved family member, but being able to say, let's try this, let's see what happens. And, sometimes it takes folks weeks, months, years, decades to have an experience. we had ours the second night. Um, and this was in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. That's where you have the tree and the footsteps. But to really
Yeah,
quick touch on the BFRO, that's Matt Moneymaker.
it is. Yep.
He
Yep.
founded that. And
Yes.
Matt Moneymaker, for those who may not know, he was on Finding Bigfoot. He was one of the lead guys there,
Yep.
along with the rest of the team. And I can't wait to hear on your little journey with Cliff and Mount Hood. I can't wait to get there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
for
so
sure.
that's Matt Moneymaker, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. But yeah, so you went to the BFRO website and you go on this investigation in Los Alamos, and this is back in 2012 or something.
Yep.
Let's talk about that. Talk about what you heard, what you may have seen. There's an orb in there, I think, in my notes.
Yeah.
Let's hear about that.
For sure. So I'll get right to the second night. We were a group of five, 5 guys. And two of them split off. One of them that, was with a group of two. He was one of the leaders, if you will. So he was with the BFRO. And so him and another fellow, they kind of went off at one path. Myself, the family member and this, other guy who was there said, well, we're going to go down this other path. And what was, there was no wind that night. You could hear your pulse beating almost in your ears. No mosquitoes, no flies, no bugs, no crickets, no nothing. I mean, it was just dead silent. And the moon was full. And I think that, to me, that I always kind of say, like, you might hear two camps. Oh, go when there's a new moon, or go when there's a full moon. I'm a full moon person. And then we started to kind of do this. I don't know, we just kind of made up a tactic where let's walk 15, 20 feet and let's just stop in the shadows, because the moon was, shining over those pines and creating these fantastic, dark, deep shadows. And so we were like, okay, let's stop in these, because number one, it gave us time for our eyes to adjust and could kind of see down the trail and see up into this, incline that was going up a hill, but yet into the forest line. And so we would kind of we did this for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so. And then we got to a part where we heard this pebble kind of, what I would say is like, dislodge itself from wherever it was sitting, and it just kind of trickled down. It's not like it was thrown or anything. There wasn't a large, pop or tick, and then it fell. It just was like tit, 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 tit. So, but we looked to, try to, like, okay, we all heard that. No, did you hear it? Yeah. Okay. Where did you? Okay. And so we all kind of corroborated the fact, like, yeah, we all heard this little pebble fall down the hill. Obviously, I was expecting truly to see a Sasquatch just kind of, hunched over, sitting on a hill, being like, oops, you got me. But nothing there. And so, okay, we're going to proceed, start and stop in shadows, right? And so I think we only did another maybe 15, 30 feet max, if that even. And we got this very deep guttural growl that shook, the shirt off your chest. And it unfortunately, we were so novice at this point, that we didn't have like the audio gear, and we were told not to, by any means, unless their life like depended on it, which, what does that mean? To turn on our headlamps, right? So we all just kind of stared and stopped and looked at each other, and we started slowly backing up, because we knew that we had just gotten growled at. We had all immediately knew that we gotten growled at by a Sasquatch, because it wasn't a bear. A bear doesn't have that kind of long sustained, they typically grunt. No way it was a coyote, way too deep. I mean, it just nothing. It was a Sasquatch. That's all we could say to it.
For those who were there and present at the time you heard this growl, was any of the people, of the members, local to this area? Were they familiar with the wildlife of the area, the sights, the sounds?
Maybe this other third person was, because typically, you're going to go to what's the most local. Great question. I don't recall if he was a local or not, but he seemed to be if you're out in here and he was a younger solo guy. So I would imagine like the fact that he was doing all of this kind of solo and with the BFRO, I would have, kind of pontificating here a little bit, but it's just the idea of like, yeah, I would imagine that he would have, if anyone, he would have been like, yeah, that's not anyone. But no, do I know that for a fact? I do not know if he was local. But when we radioed back to the other two, and because we were like, okay, we're going to back up, we're going to radio this, the BFRO fella, and told him kind of what was going on. We decided, okay, let's go back to the meeting spot where we kind of split off at the fork of the trail. So meet us there. And as we were kind of walking, then I radioed again. I was like, okay, we're about here. And I said, oh, I think I see you. And because what I saw was a kind of orangish, reddish glow, amberish glow, which I thought was a headlight, but it was the size of like, it started as like, kind of more of a pinpoint being grapefruit, right? Because that's just of distance wise, but like grapefruit to like basketball, beach ball, medicine ball, you kind of have this like glow around. And then it went off. And I said, oh, I think I see you. Did you just have your headlamp on? And the guy, his name was Bill. He's like, no, there's no way you could, we haven't even like figured out a way to get out of where we are right now. It's like, no, we're nowhere near you. And I thought to myself, okay, well, maybe that was someone else. I put it out of my mind, right? Because I'm not here to hunt lights. I'm here to look for Sasquatch and have an experience with Sasquatch. Come to find out that the next day when we looked back, I was like, oh, that wasn't anybody, because what was parallel to my eyesight was actually the tops of trees, because there was a dip into the forest, almost like a kettle, and that the light source was actually like in the trees. And so the only thing I can liken it to, and this is just because I've heard other stories, it's like maybe orb, sure. I don't know what else to call it, light source. But it was amber and it was kind of moving around. So it was interesting because that was directly 180 degrees from where we had gotten growled at, for whatever that's worth to anybody. And the other thing to kind of point out during that time was, this pebble that dislodged itself. If that was a Sasquatch, did it track us, or did it, flank us so fast and without movement that we could hear that it got in front of us during that point in time? I mean, this was like, if that pebble dislodged itself, let's just say that was directly to our right by 10 feet, 15 feet. And then all of a sudden now we're here getting this growl, which is more of like a 1 o'clock if we were to continue down the path. And that to me is something that I always think of, like, or was it potentially two Sasquatch where we had one at 3 o'clock, and because that one made a noise and it could potentially jeopardize itself of getting seen. And then the big fella, or what seemed to be like a big fella, had to break protocol itself and give a big nasty guttural growl at our 1 o'clock. Don't know, but that's kind of where the light was happening. We decided to go back down the path to where we got growled at. We kept moving forward. But unknown to us, this is where there was this big, massive meadow, that literally it seemed to cut its way all the way down through this mountainside. And, on the other side of the meadow was another tree line. And we kind of got about halfway. And then this is where Bill says, hey, I just kind of need a verbal commit from everyone. And there was 5 of us. So we were 3, we got growled at. we're now coming back, and now we're 5, which I think kind of leads up to what happened next. But he's like, okay, no, if we get bluff charged, just look down and then sit down. Don't look at it in the eyes. And it's like, wow, okay, this is getting more real. And it seemed like we were in, some type of like an African safari or African jungle, where it's like we're about to get bluff charged by, a silverback, and you just had to kind of give your commit. Like, yeah, if this happens, just don't look at it and don't freak out. And oh yeah, by the way, don't freak out, because the thing that that thousands and millions of people say don't exist actually exist, right? So we sure gave a verbal commit. We continued walking up to the next tree line. Bill took out this like wood block. He knocked it once, nothing happened. And then we walked another perhaps 10 or 15 feet into the wood line, and that's when you just hear this big break of a tree. And later on, I think it was like, I don't know, 6, 7, or 8 inches in diameter. So it wasn't nothing, but this tree gets broken down. You hear this leaf litter and this, the branches and popping and breaking, across other trees. And then we hear this rumbling, and I see all these shadows getting up, starting to like pop up and start to move around. I'm like, what in the world is going on? And that was actually at this point where I always say I get vulnerable at this point of the story, because it's like I reached back for that family member and I was like, I think this is it. I don't know what we've gotten ourselves into, but we might not make it out of here. Because it was just bananas.
How close were you to these shadows? About
30 yards.
Okay, so it's some distance. Okay.
Some distance, but yet there was so many of them. And what it was, Gino, it was about 30 unattended mountain cattle that had popped up from their slumber and got freaked out because of the tree getting knocked down and broken, that they all started stampeding down the same meadow that we just crossed. And after that subsided, after about, I don't know, 2 minutes. I mean, it just it was nuts. And once it subsided and it got quiet again, then you heard this crunch, this very lumberous bipedal foot walking away from obviously us. And it just kind of disappeared down into the forest. But when I say down is because the next day we looked there, and this was like a 30-degree decline. Like this was basically like it just walked off into a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where this thing decided to walk. And like we wanted to look further the next day, but you needed rope to get down here. And this thing just went off in this direction and just disappeared.
That's crazy. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, where the terrain that the creature traversed would have been just an incredible feat for a man to do.
If we were to try to follow that at night, we would have either broken something because someone would have absolutely fallen, or someone would have died. Like, because those just, yeah, there was grass, but it was like tall thicket grass, but you had jagged rocks peeking out. That just would have not been a good situation. So like it positioned itself very well to know that like, I'm going to break this tree, stop following me. And if you do, good luck. I'll see you at the bottom of this cliff,
The tree, where was the break at? About how high? At what point of the tree was the break?
Yeah, this was a great question. No one actually asked that. Maybe about knee to thigh height. I'm 6'1", so give or take 2 to 3 feet. So it was lower. It wasn't like midway.
Just real quick, to go back to the silence that you had touched on in the area and this was night 2, correct?
Yeah.
Was night 1 any different as far as the silence, or was this a completely different feel on night 2?
So night 1, we actually did hear footsteps, and it was I think night one, we were a group of 7 or 8. And this was, when you go out with the BFRO, there's like 20 to 30 people. um, and so it just so happened that like, yeah, night one was a bigger group, and the person that we were with heard it, and they were a leader, and they were radioing in, trying to make sure that everyone was accounted for. Everyone was. I want to say multiple groups actually did hear the same kind of walking. So it seemed like this was very intentional, like, but it was the exact same to me, breadth and depth and pace of what we heard the first night. Crunch, 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 just elaborate, slow, not expedited or in a rush, right? I mean, this thing was just slow moving, but intentional, obviously, with that tree break.
The light, the orb. I imagine maybe back then at that time, well, I'm not sure what your ideas or thoughts were on this light and a potential relationship with this creature. I'm sure now I don't have to tell you about how common the association is between orbs and the sightings of these creatures.
Right.
But back then, what were your thoughts? Or even now, what is your idea or your thoughts on orbs and the relationship to the sightings? Do you think there's a connection?
I don't know. Honestly, I mean, I think that there's no more of a connection, or there's just as much of a connection, right? Depending upon how you want to frame that, between us, Sasquatch, orbs, aliens, ghosts. It's all somehow connected, right? I don't know if anyone has that. Only thing I'm thinking of was like, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where one of the characters has these pictures like stringed up. It's like kind of like that standard, like there's all these pictures and how do they connect, and it's always attached by strings or like corkboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, I to feel like that's what it's potentially connected, but I don't know how. And like, until, for me personally, because I think people have seen Sasquatch come out of portals, they have seen Sasquatch either turn into light or become light, walk out of spaceships, go into spaceships, like there's or UFOs or UAPs. It's like, until I have that experience, I can't say that, one equals two, and at this case, I would say it was interesting enough. And when I was in Sam Houston National Park in 2014 investigating there, this is actually where we were there because it just so happened that there was a Sasquatch incident that had happened, and it involved a campsite getting completely mauled to the point where like the tent was in the tree type of situation. But then when we got there, we had understood that, or at least it was told to us, that the FBI had been there, and we could not investigate the actual location that we wanted to because there was all sorts of, yellow tape around there. So what was, on one hand, there was that instance, but then I also saw this was a different shape of orb, and others had seen it at this point, which was nice. And I actually have it on audio recording where it says, "What is a car doing in the forest?" Or maybe I said woods, but it was like, "What is a car doing in the woods?" Because it was like a tail light of like a 1992 Cadillac, right? Those just really long tail light, it was more pinkish red,
Thin vertical light.
Yeah. And so I was like, what the hell? And it boggles my mind. Like, why does someone have a car in the woods? Like, how did they even get here? But then of course, as we get closer, and I kind of blinked my eyes a few times, obviously there was no car. And everyone was accounted for.
Is this Sabine River, Texas?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was a couple of years after the Los Alamos.
Yes. Yeah, that was 2012. Texas was 2014.
Okay, so you saw this strange vertical light orb, whatever you want to call it. How far away?
This one was further. Um, this one was probably, I want to say like 70 yards, 80 yards. But there was a clearing, right? Like it wasn't like there was forest that I was looking through. Whereas this was actually like just before a wood line where I could see it, and that's why I thought. And this is, I think, where it's very interesting about how people see things and what their brains tell them that they're seeing, or that your brain tries to make logic out of everything. But I was like, oh, that's why I said there's a car in the woods. Like, why is a car in the wood? But it's because there was this clearing. So that's why I could say, yeah, about 70, 80 yards, but it was clear, and it was, there wasn't any trees or forests that were obstructing my view of this light source.
Did it just suddenly appear and then suddenly disappear? Did it move off?
Just like Los Alamos. It went on, and then it went off, like as if someone was standing there, but nobody was, and when I say like, oh, I think, why does someone's car, like, because I think at that point in time, the way I was looking at it is, oh, someone is parked in such a way that I can only see the one tail light. And it also was so bright that's where I was saying, oh, it must be a tail light because it's so bright. But then literally as as quickly as I blinked and kind of shook my head, it was gone. So
did you make your way to where it was to look around?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. Nothing there. Very quiet.
Is it possible someone could have been there with some kind of light source, or not likely?
Totally. Yeah. I always give option. I'm almost more hopeful for that. Right? Like I'm hopeful that I just didn't see someone walking into the woods, but they would have been alone. And this is an area where you're going to have snakes. You're going to actually also have wild boar. And I couldn't imagine someone being there solo, but if they were, then great, because that would explain it.
Did you call out at all? Or was it just so quick that, wow, something was there, something was gone?
No, I said it out loud. Others in the group, I think, saw it, and then they didn't. I think everyone else was just kind of in this group again. We were kind of split off, but it was still probably a group of, 6 or 8, and I think maybe some saw it. And as soon as I saw it, acknowledged it, said it. What is a car doing in the woods? And looked at my feet, I think, just to make sure I wasn't stepping on anything or any again, snakes or whatever, like just to like catch my footing. And by the time I looked up and shook my head of like, what the hell was that? It was gone. It was not there.
And what did you make of it in the moment? What was your conclusion at what you had saw?
Kind of the same thing, in New Mexico, where it was like, that's a thing. I can't explain it. That's not what I'm here for. It's not harming me. It's at a distance, right? So it's like, and I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's crazy.
Can't really, it's.
Was there anything else associated with that sighting, like a sound, smell, anything?
Yeah, so then the next morning, another family member said they smelled this. It was kind of interesting because we were supposed to go deep in the woods, but then we kind of got moved to like Grand Central Station, which basically means like the bathroom was maybe like, another 60 yards away from our tent. And you had other like mobile home type folks, tenting there or, camping there or whatever. And so that's what I would call like Grand Central Station, as opposed to like in the woods, like we were in Los Alamos. But there was that next morning, that's when a family member had this like dirty cat urine smell brushed the tent. And onions. Like, it was just like kind of like all the bad smells, right? Like dirty cat urine and rotting onions, right? So that's brushed the tent. And this family member woke up and was like, what was that? Like, it woke them out of their sleep because it stunk so bad, but it kind of lingered. And let us know. And we all kind of, I have a horrible sense of smell. This other family member, again, it was with the two family members, and like they both kind of, they could smell something. I couldn't smell anything. But that was the only other instance of like what happened. And then, of course, looked around the tent, nothing there, because, in 20 feet there was like basically a road. So unless it was a cat, but this was a super foul smell, and like they still remember it to this day.
And like the orbs, you often hear of that stench associated when there's a sighting of a Sasquatch. And like you touched on it about, Sasquatch and UFOs, and we can put our tinfoil hats on, talk all night about this, but I don't know what it is either. I'm kind of with you, but nevertheless, it is just so common, the lights and then the sighting. And often as well, that incredible stench is there too.
It's been reported for, I think at this point, decades. Ron Moorhead has even mentioned that he would see plenty of orbs, and he was very, he's very famous for capturing the Sierra sounds. So like, there's plenty of eyewitnesses who say they see orbs right as they're having or about to have some type of a Sasquatch experience. And again, like I don't know how those are apples to apples, but other than they are happening in the forest. That is the linkage, if anything, at this point.
Let's move up a few years to Mount Hood and your time with Cliff Barackman from Finding Bigfoot.
Yeah, so he was trying to kind of do the same thing. This is kind of where, after Finding Bigfoot was wrapping up, and he was going to take a very small group into the woods. I was hounding his, I don't know, I think it was Instagram or something at that point. And, he finally said, okay, accepting applications. And I immediately sent one in, and, he actually called me, and I was cool to talk to Cliff Barackman. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was at work, and I was like, okay, I'm going to cancel these. I got to cancel my work meetings.
Absolutely.
I don't care. I don't care if I get my wrist slapped. But yeah, to talk to him, and ultimately, set up a time for, joining his expedition. And this is where I actually met, I still have a very close friend. I had another friend at that point. We lost touch, but, this is kind of where he took us to Mount Hood. And he was offering different, guests, if you will. And so I was always very keen to be going out with, when Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, the late, great Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, is on the bill, you got to pick that one.
100%.
So, I did, went out there and, was able to pick his brain, was actually able and lucky enough.
Oh, so it was Cliff and Dr. Meldrum on
this?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, it was,
I didn't know your time with them was together. That's just even more of a bonus. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, truly. Thank you for, I guess now that you put it that way, Gino. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And this was like a lifelong hero, right? Because when you're talking about all of these different, whether it was Monster Quest, whether it was just anything on the History Channel, anything to do with Sasquatch or Bigfoot, Gigantopithecus, like Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum was the guy and the only academia person doing it, and the person who had all of the, and yes, evidence of actual footprints, because that's evidence. And you know that to me is where it was like, you got to go with the man. He was the man. And I think now I want to say he gave all of his I think Cliff actually inherited all of the footprints. And I saw my buddy who is very close with Cliff actually like showed me a video, and I'm like, he just has it all. And I'm like, that is insane. How many bins and crates and like trays of all these footprints are there at the North American
the museum? Yeah, I'd love
Bigfoot
to get
Center.
up there.
So,
Yes.
yeah, please do. I will give all the credit to that place. I mean, they're really doing a great job. So yeah, being out there with Dr. J, as I kind of teasingly called him, he seemed to allow it, so that's why I continued it. So that kind of just shows you again the character who he was and is. But yeah, being out there and just learning from him and hearing from him, and obviously with Cliff as well, right? So one of the first that was the first expedition there, and not much happened for my group that first expedition. However, there was another group who did capture 2 shadows, I want to say on Fleur, that they saw 2 heat sources that were basically bipedal, that were trampling through the woods. It was myself, this family member, and Dr. Meldrum. So it was very cool to frankly have one-on-one time. We sat on a log, Gino, for like 2 hours just talking to Dr. Jeff Meldrum in the middle of the woods in Mount Hood at like 2 a.m. So,
oh my God, did you record that by chance? Did you have audio or no?
No, yeah. Well, that's a great question. I think we were the back group because at that time, Dr. Meldrum couldn't really traverse as he once did, as we all are all going to get there. But yeah, he couldn't. He just, yeah. So we hung back with him, and to me, it was kind of funny. I was more interested, if you can believe this, more interested in having one-on-one time with Dr. Meldrum than actually having a Bigfoot experience. Because like the Bigfoot experience is 50-50 at best. Whereas like I'm here with the guy and I could be talking with him and picking his brain and just having him get to know me and vice versa. And so that was truly like the rose of the trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it wasn't until the second time out with him, and frankly Cliff, but this time it was with Cliff and a couple others, where we did capture, and this is actually, I have it on my Instagram, which is the Bigfoot Archive. This is where I actually do have audio of what I believe, what I think others in the group would also believe, is a baby Sasquatch blowing bubbles or raspberries in a tree. You can actually hear, and I'll try to do this the best I can. You hear that in a tree.
About how far from you?
Oh man, we were at literally at the tree baseline, and we were looking up and trying to see. And at this point, Cliff had actually broken protocol, which means you're turning on your light. So we were all, I mean, poor thing. And then we had, again, my family member, we were wiser this time. So we actually had FLIR, it wasn't FLIR, but it was a infrared camera. Right. And so he was looking in the tree, and he could see this. For those who might not know, all trees carry heat. And so, but what was different is that there was heat within this heat source. And this heat source was like, it kept moving and it kept going higher up into the tree. And so like at one point, he was, let's just say this trail is, 6 feet wide, if that. Old logging road is what it probably was. And he he was on the opposite side of this, trail, and like was arching his back so much to just try to like get to the top of this tree, but like he was following it, and he kept having to go back further and further and further just to see how far this thing was climbing up the tree. And what was so fascinating about this incident was, again, everything was still, nothing was moving. And as I'm not doing this story justice, because the first time that we got there, we crossed this area, right? Where we walked down the one path, we had to come back to it. But as we were walking down this path and crossing this area, we had this R2D2 whippoorwill type of noise go off, and it freaked me out. So much so that I actually was like, this family member is like, "You're kind of hyperventilating. I need you to like chill out." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I'm freaked out. I feel like we're in the nursery." And this is where I guess I'm like, that was my initial thought, was that we're in the nursery. We've disturbed something. That is an alarm. And how interesting is it that then when we came back, we heard nothing. It was my friend at the time, and he again took out a wood block. It's like, "Where the hell did you get that?" And knocked on it once or twice, and then this tree just starts. It's just swaying back and forth, and it was the only tree swaying back and forth in the woods in this path that was 10 feet away from us. So that's why we approached it, because it started swaying. Which, I mean, not to be super silly about it, but like, because there's probably something heavy at the top, right? Or at least midway. And so some type of weight that's making it sway. So that's why we approached it. And that's why we're just like, why is this one tree swaying? Like, what is happening? And that's when I have it on audio. You can, again, go to Bigfoot Archive. It's there. It's quick, but I also show the waveform. So one of them is more up and down, and then the second one that is there is more down, or excuse me, up and then down, if that makes sense. You'll see it on the waveform. And what was also very interesting was, so it was the fact that like initially when we went through that area, I thought nursery. Well, it just so happens that now we are, what else could be in this tree but a juvenile, right, at oldest. And it was there was a woman who was there. She just so happened, Gino, to have like baby toys and a rattle and like a little squeaky thing. Like, she had baby toys. And so she sat down. She offered to sit down in front of this tree and talk very sweetly, right? "Hi, are you there? Do you want to talk to us? We're not going to hear," very, doting. And we were like, I don't know, we were about 80 yards away from her. So I'm like, if anything happens, no one is going to save her. Like, she is on her own. And I was therming the entire time. And I'm like, oh God, because the entire time when we were by this tree base, I was like, I think that might have been older sibling who gave the initial signal. I'm just going to call it that. Now, what I will say, which I've never again said on a podcast, was this is where Cliff was like, it's probably a barred owl. But I always thought, but Sasquatch are so good at mimicking coyotes, mimicking other animals. How do we know that it was a barred owl, right? How do we know that? And so I was thinking, where's older sibling? Then I was thinking, where's mom? Mom can't be too far, unless that's just how they are, But I was wondering about where's mom, and then the last thought I had was, on top of where's mom, where's where's dad? Because dad, you don't want to mess with. I don't want to come into contact with a 10 to 12 foot Sasquatch that could easily dismember all of us. And like, we would just disappear. That's all I would say. So I was kind of like, where are the others is what my thought process was. But I have that on recording. This woman making all the baby noises and kind of trying to entice this thing to maybe come down. Like, that never happened. We kind of just picked up sticks and that was it. And it is, you probably have heard this before as well, Gino, where it's like the shoulda, coulda, woulda's of any Bigfooter is, the list is probably miles long, because what I totally regret us not doing is calling the rest of Cliff's group into the area and saying, everyone is going to hold hands around this tree. And I don't care if we have to stay here until daylight, right? Like, and someone is going to climb this tree to like chase this thing, again, baby Sasquatch or not, out, right? Like, that's to me what we should have done. We didn't. So shoulda, coulda, woulda.
How long did you wait or stay under this tree?
Yeah, we were there for probably an hour. And because nothing was happening, because maybe the thought process was, and of course you're taking, anyone is going to take Cliff's lead on this, where it's like, if nothing's happening, maybe it's not what we think it is. But it's also, Sasquatch have a hell of a lot of patience, and they will outwait you. It's almost like there's plenty of stories where they don't even look like they're moving. Sometimes they'll sway. You'll hear those stories where they'll sway back and forth between a tree, but I think that it's just patience, that they do have the intelligence to understand that, the hairless beings, from all intents and purposes, the hairless beings will move on. They don't have the patience to stick around. Like, just wait. They'll move. That's what they do.
What a memory from time with Dr. Meldrum and even Cliff.
Yeah.
That is so awesome.
And we've met up with him at other conferences. So it was great to, it's always nice when you can have some type of rapport, especially with a person like that.
100%. I wanted to touch on the whoop that you had heard from Colorado. Can you just touch on that real quick? What was that about? What happened there?
This was interesting because this was actually it was like an abandoned coal mine area. And what was very interesting about this whoop was it actually, so it was this buddy that I had, and him and I were just kind of traipsing in the woods, and there was like some old, I don't know, colonial, rock fence that we were kind of hopping over, and everything in that area was just kind of old. And so we were in this kind of like coal mine area, and sure enough, there was this whoop where it actually kind of, what was interesting about it was it kind of rolled its whoop. And I'll try to reenact that the best I can. It's kind of a Chewbacca whoop, like whoop, but it was deeper than that, like whoop. So it kind of rolled or like gargled the whoop, but I don't know. And my buddy came flying out of the, flying out of the woods. I was like, dude, don't joke. Like, that you're breaking, code if you're doing this. Like, and his eyes were very wide. He was like, that's why I'm here next to you. That wasn't me. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I trust him. But the whoop was it was just once, but it was a very, again, kind of gargly whoop, but it was deep. And that's all there really was to that story. There's nothing, we didn't track it. We were with lady friends, so we didn't want to stray too far. But it just kind of also showed that, like, yeah, as you kind of hear, in a lot of these stories, like Ape Canyon or any type of coal mine, any type of cave situation, there's possibility that there are these creatures that live there.
That area, Topaz Mountain, are there like multiple reports of any sightings? Have you ever heard of anything coming from that area? Anything significant?
Yeah. So this is my buddy lived in Colorado, and we were following his lead on that, of where to go. So I would imagine, I never really dug too hard into that, but I was following his lead is the best I would say. I didn't study that. No, I did not study that area.
And the back to Mount Hood, the rock throne.
Yeah.
What's that story about?
Yeah, so so this buddy and another very close friend of Cliff, we all kind of became friends after the first Mount Hood area. And I was solo actually, and these two guys were actually, like, they couldn't have been more than 50 yards from me, but there was this rock that got thrown. I mean, I would say it was probably, again, the size of the size of a grapefruit to like a brick. But it went hauling over I heard it through the tree, like the tops of the tree line. So to have something to get thrown that was breaking the branches of the top of these trees, and pines, right? And just not losing any stamina, like that's what this object was. That's the force of which this thing was thrown. And it was hauling. And, it was crack after crack after crack, 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 snap, snap, snap. And like nothing was slowing this thing down. And so and this was in my direction. And I never heard it actually land. But it was just crack, 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 crack. And, again, this is where you really have to go out with people that you trust. Because I asked them, is there any, did you throw a rock? Right? Like, just, okay, cool. If you did, funny, haha. They're like, no, dude, do you see the packs on us? Like, we're how would we even know where you were? And you want us to throw a rock at you? Like, what if we actually hit you? So I was like, okay, good point. Good point. So yeah, they claim that they didn't throw it. I'm going to buy that story. And so the only thing that I have left then is something threw this at us. And one of the things I don't have in my notes was that was the same night. Maybe it was the night before. Either way, we were in the same area and we were camping in this area, where one of the friends thought that he had seen he saw something gray or white, more of a, let's just say, silver haired, something run across the path. And we saw the next morning and he was freaked. This was in the middle of the night. We were kind of maybe I don't know, 15, 20 yards behind him. So we were trying to kind of let him do a solo thing as bait. That's kind of what you do. And he did a shimmy of a freeze and slipped in the gravel. I will never forget. And he did this full on dance move on this path and to stop his feet. And he got freaked, but he couldn't go anywhere. So it was a little cartoonish. And so, but he saw what he thought he saw something cross this path and just bolted up this hill. And that's actually, again, something else I don't have in my notes is when we investigated the next morning, it was just another fella and myself. We thought that we could possibly make out bipedal footprints going up this, again, very steep incline. And as we tried to follow it, we heard a very audible kind of wood pop or knock. We both looked at each other. Of course, you do that standard, like, did you hear that? Yeah, I heard that. Did you hear that? And it was so steep that we're like, dude, how are we going to even like get down if we were to even climb up this thing? So yeah, that was Mount Hood that is a great area. Also, the Gifford Pinchot area that's where I've had experiences.
Through your investigations, and you mentioned, hearing the steps going certain directions, and speaking of tracks, have you ever seen any prints that you thought were associated with what you had experienced? Have you ever see anything that, wow, we can cast this, that's a print?
Nothing that was, I mean, we might have seen something that what I thought was like it's so funny. What I thought was maybe dermal ridges, which is kind of like your finger or toe prints. But I think that was more, for whatever reason, that's just how the mud was laying, or
Gotcha.
I try to explain. No, nothing that's like, so when you are casting prints, if there is not like the gold standard is like, you got all 5 toes, you've got the ball of the foot, you've got the mid-tarsal break, you've got the heel. That's like the quintessential, like, yes, cast that. Everything else is like maybe, and the terrain is just not conducive to, you're going to cast it, but it's going to come out just a big chunk of, cement, basically. It's just not going to do anything. No, I would love to find that, but again, it's few and far between. I might have seen something interesting at Los Alamos, but nothing castable, just because it was on such delicate, sand road almost, where it's like, unless you have a bottle of hairspray with you, you're not casting that. And by hairspray, there's different techniques where like you could possibly use hairspray, and I think you can technically cast out of snow, but that's a different substance, and no, we did not have that.
That's a question for Cliff.
Yeah, he's the foot guy.
The cast king for sure. Yeah, I look forward to when I can get up there and see that collection he's got. Just amazing stuff. I wanted to ask about your books, the 3 books you've written. We can close out with that. Touch on those books. You got the Billy Finds Bigfoot, Is It Real or Not? And a recent one, Cedar's Soup Day. Talk about those for a minute.
Yeah, so Billy Finds Bigfoot, that's when I was really into finding Bigfoot and was about to go on my first expedition, right, to Los Alamos again. So that was where I was like, oh man, maybe let's just see if I can do this. And it just so happened that I actually ended up hooking up with a friend out here in Wisconsin. He's like, yeah, you should come out to, this area. I want to say Black River Falls area. And, Doug Hajicek's going to be there. I'm like, wait, the Doug Hajicek from Monster Quest? Doug Hajicek? Like the Doug Hajicek? And he was like, yeah. He was the one who, produced my book, and maybe, you've got your children's book. And I was like, oh man, yeah. Okay. So I was so in. So talk about, lightning striking again for me, as you mentioned about Cliff and Dr. Meldrum, but it's like, I was able to go out camping with Doug Hajicek and pitched him my book. And he was like, yeah, we're wanting to get into kids' book. And yeah, we would love to sign you. And I was like, whoa, yeah. Sold. Like, as you do sell your book, like, yeah, you're not going to get the greatest cut, but like, it was awesome, right? Like, okay, yeah, let's get this book printed, and it's by Hangar One Publishing. Fantastic. So for Billy Finds Bigfoot, you can find that on Amazon and also on hangar1publishing.com. But then I wanted to try my hand at more of a middle school, like, okay, I really kind of wanted that fun travel size book, adventure book. for middle schoolers. So is it real or not? That's really where we have the two main characters out in Washington. I think the next book I allude to them getting out to Mount Hood. I haven't written that yet, so that's perhaps my next project. But where it's more of allowing the reader to answer or start to ask their own questions. I've already asked these questions. I already feel like I have the answers to it, but it's giving them again the space for the reader to start to ask their own questions of, is this real or not? And kind of following Theo into this big Theo and Finn into these big questions, right, of this topic. But then I also was like, I always wanted to, if you ever have a little in your life who might love Sasquatch, there's actually, I haven't found too much that they could perhaps watch on TV that's cartoon or like that's kid friendly about a Sasquatch. And so I wanted to do something and produce something that was more of a claymation for, say the 2 to 5 year olds. About Sasquatch, and this is more so about a Sasquatch picking, mushrooms, making a soup. Yes, the Sasquatch makes soup. He can also make fire, so you're going to see that in the book. Just give it a break. But being able to make soup for his forest friends, and what that means to share and to when things happen, like you tip over your mushroom basket, it's okay. Things happen, right? So that's more of a claymation picture book, but yet there's a storyline to it for littles in your life. But you can find Is It Real or Not and Cedar Soup Day on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. But yeah, those are the books that I have out right now.
That's awesome, and I'll include links to those, so if people want to grab one, make it a little easier for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you go to the Bigfoot Archive, that's actually, please give me a follow. That's my Instagram. That's where I'm basically showing all of the collectibles that I have about the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Wild Man, Yeti, Abominable Snowman, the Woods Woes, all of these. The story, the global topic is where I'm showing all those kind of collectibles and what I'm curating there. But then my link tree on Instagram actually takes you to all the books, but I will be happy to share that with you, Gino.
So cool. Instagram.com / the Bigfoot Archive. I'll get that on there as well. And just real quick, to close before we go out, what are your feelings on this creature?
Yeah. In short, it's leaving tracks. So it's got to be flesh and blood. At the same time, there are certainly reports of people seeing it disappearing behind a tree or disappearing in general or getting I love to tell the story where there's a person had witnessed a Sasquatch coming out of a UFO handcuffed to a briefcase and then disappear into the woods. Cool. Right? Like, all I know is this is, especially with the with AI making it harder for people to believe their own eyes, it's actually a good thing. It's forcing you to get out in the forest and actually have your own experiences. So therefore, I have to think of my own experiences. We got growled at. We had a tree get broken down. Nothing was spooking this cattle until this tree got broken in half or so, and the baby blowing raspberries in the tree. Like, what is in a tree that has lips that could blow raspberries? So my experiences are telling me that there's something in these woods, in the north, at least in the North American forest, Canada, and now globally and regionally, there are thousands of stories where you have these same type of reports that are happening globally. So I think it's just truly kind of a matter of time until we have a next best Patterson-Gimlin footage of 1967. I also think that the only way we're going to beat AI is to say, okay, people are going to have to go out there with reel-to-reel film and audio and show and basically say, like, yes, we've caught an image on film and it's a Sasquatch. And we can do all sorts of diagnostics on it, like Bill Muntz has done on the PG film. and say that, yeah, there is proof that there is something out there. Oh, and by the way, it's 7 feet tall, given the fact that depending upon your camera, the distance, and all sorts of, mathematics, we can actually say an object is a certain height because of it. So that to me is super exciting. And so I would say it this way. I'm also very open to if it is a portal hopper, if it is something extraterrestrial, all good things. It's a part of the mystery. We don't have a Jane Goodall yet figure in the Bigfoot community who is able to actually study these things. Until we have that person, I think that's what makes this topic so exciting, is because it's for someone to perhaps one of the littles in our life, which is why full circle, why I think these books are important, because the topic is so, I think, incredibly fun and fascinating.
I agree 100% to everything you said. And I look forward to the day when we get that evidence that finally can bring it out there and put it in light, and we can just say, see, there it is.
Yeah. And how do we, hopefully we do the right thing and start to say, here's how we protect it. But that opens a can of worms, because I think that's hundreds of thousands of acres that we would then have to put aside for this creature, which it's not too good for the logging industry and all that stuff.
Yeah, it would change everything for sure. No doubt about it. It would change everything in a lot of different levels. But Kev, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your stories. I've had a great time. Like I said, I can go hours with you, I think, if we wanted to.
Yeah, but I'm going to the UP towards September, and I'll tell you what, Gino, I will keep you posted, and maybe we can get on the phone again.
Oh, I would appreciate that. That'd be fantastic. Yeah, keep me updated and stay in touch.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Kev.
Thank you much.
Hello? Is there anyone here with me?